Welcome to this video, and we are going to edit this image. This is an HDR Panorama photo, and we started from here. As you can see, the difference is like night and day, and it takes a lot of steps to get here. So you will learn a lot from this course. And if you accept a piece of advice, definitely download the raw files so you can follow every step after me. Because this way you will learn much faster. And the goal is for you to be able to apply these techniques to your own photos as well. Before we start editing, however, let's talk about composition. With a panorama, you're in a difficult situation with composition because you can't see the finished picture in advance. But you can roughly know which elements you definitely want to include. And here we have several main elements as well. Of course, we have the main subject of our picture, which is the volcano. This is the Teide Volcano located in Tenerife, Spain. This volcano is photographed by many thousands of people every day. So when we photograph a place that has already had countless pictures taken of it and will continue to have in the future, it's worth adding something unique to that location. And there are many ways to do this, but I think the simplest is to find an interesting foreground. So instead of just photographing the thing we want or consider the main subject, we find an interesting foreground for it. And well, I had to search for quite a while, but I found this foreground. Then I had to come back here at an early dawn when the foreground was frozen. It wasn't planned for it to freeze. It was a great stroke of luck. And I also waited months for the top of the volcano to be snowy like this. I found this foreground and set up the camera in such a way that these bushes wouldn't obscure the background too much, so that this foreground would be included and this rock would also be in the shot. Because I imagined this location in such a way that what people will see is either this or that, but most likely the volcano will be the first thing they look at, and then their eyes will return to the foreground. Because this is also very interesting. And then we call this an anchor point. I also include an element that is not necessarily the most interesting, but it draws people's eyes back here. And then afterwards. Here we have very interesting mountain ranges that they will definitely look at. For example, the mountain has a greenish color, which nicely leads us back to the mountain range. If you can get people to look at as much of your picture as possible, it means they will spend more and more time with it. And the more time they spend with your picture, the more likely they are to like it. So they look at the mountain, then the foreground, then the rock, then the mountain range, and then the mountain again. Then they look at it as a whole as well. You will encounter this kind of composition or something similar many times in my pictures. Perhaps it would be a little better if this foreground were more prominent here, but unfortunately I couldn't manage that because then this ugly bush would have been much more in the foreground. So I didn't want that, which is why the left side of the picture is a bit empty. If that bothers someone, it could be cropped. I didn't do it. I kept it as is, because I can use it much better as a background this way. I won't waste any more time. Let's edit the picture in Photoshop. Did you know you can download the raw files to practice? Go to shutterseek.co.uk, create a free account, log in, and find the video you're currently watching in the Edit Like a Pro course. Download the raw files and edit this picture with me. This way you'll improve much faster. Also, hit subscribe to join the channel. My mission here is to give you professional level training that you usually have to pay for. You can download all of them and follow all the steps after me. This way you will learn much faster. So I grab them, drag them into Photoshop. And since these are raw files, Camera Raw opens where we can edit our photo with much more data. Fortunately, you don't have to do each one individually. You just need to stitch them together into an HDR panorama. And if you remember, I demonstrated on this image how to create an HDR panorama. If you haven't seen that video, I definitely recommend you watch it. There you will understand much better how HDR panoramas work. But I'll briefly explain it here as well. So I set up my camera to have a medium exposure, which means nothing is too bright or too dark. I tried to set up the camera correctly. The camera was in manual mode, and here you can see that our settings are ISO 200, f10, 1/6 of a second, and our focal length is 12 millimeters, but this actually corresponds to 24 millimeters on a full frame camera, since this was taken with a small Olympus Micro 4/3 camera. So here we have a multiplier of 2. So I set up the camera so that everything would be approximately correct, and also to automatically take 2 additional photos, one underexposed and one overexposed. This is often necessary to ensure that we have enough information in the shadowed areas and with the underexposed photo to make sure nothing is blown out in the bright areas. In reality, we can recover anything even from the brightest image something we learned in the basics. If you remember, to always slightly overexpose, the image quality will be much better, there will be less noise, and as you can see, we can often recover even the seemingly blown out areas. We will always use all the images. If we move on, you can see that I slightly turned the camera to the right, which was on a tripod of course, and the image stabilizer was turned off. When shooting from a tripod, always turn off all stabilizers. And I took this series of 3 shots in the same way, then turned to the right, and did the same, then turned to the right again, and so on. This way you don't really have to think about anything on the spot. You simply set up the camera to take series of 3 shots, and you just need to ensure that the overlap is as large as possible. The greater the overlap between the 2 images, the easier Photoshop will stitch our panorama together. So, select all of them. I click here and press Command A. And from now on, remember that if I say Command and you have a Windows computer, you should press Control. And if I say Option, then you should press Alt. So Command A, 3 dots, merge to HDR Panorama. You should see a window like this, and here you can choose from 3 options. Always check all 3, and decide which one you like the most. I think the middle one will be the best for us. Below that, there is a slider. If you drag this slider all the way to the right, it stretches the image to fill the entire space. You can use this often in landscape photography, but it has a downside. It bends straight lines. If there is a straight horizon or buildings, they typically get bent as our horizon is bent now. It's visibly bent here at the bottom left. This is relatively easy to fix, but we won't deal with it now. We'll simply not use this slider. Leave everything else empty and click on Merge. It will ask where to save the image. I save it among the others. Now you can see the photo we stitched together at the bottom left, and this is the one we will edit. First step, check what color profile we are using, and if you click on it, you can select it here. I am working on an Apple MacBook Pro. That's why I chose Display P3. If you have an Adobe RGB monitor, it's recommended to choose that. But if your display isn't of high quality, I suggest selecting ProPhoto RGB. This is the largest color profile you can work with. When editing our image, we want to work with as many colors as possible. And when we save it, we'll make it internet compatible. So I'll stick with Display P3. 16 bits per channel. Okay. So this is the image we are going to edit. All the others here are unnecessary, so I'll remove them, and let's start editing the image. The first few steps are almost the same for every image for me. I select the profile. In this case, it's a landscape photo, so let's choose landscape. I click on Auto. I reset the blacks and the colors. And this is a good starting point. Our white balance isn't quite right, so the next step is to adjust that. It's normal for us to have it a bit cool, with a slightly bluish tint in the foreground. Even though frost would basically be white, since it doesn't get sunlight, it can have a slightly cool effect in a picture, which is completely normal. I would perhaps adjust the white balance more to the top of the volcano since it gets sunlight. And for sure we need to warm it up. A little bit, but it might be easier if we use this tool. Grab it. And let's say this part should be white. Click here. Perhaps it's a bit too greenish this way. Let's go down here. And this looks better. Maybe the photo will be a bit too warm like this. So I'll cool it down to around 7,300 Kelvin. And I also feel it's a bit purplish. So I'll reduce the purple a little bit too. Let's say from +2 to -2. And I think our white balance is pretty good now. You adjust this by eye, but if you have a calibrated monitor, it helps a lot. And an important tip, if you're using an Apple display, it's worth going to Display, Settings, and definitely turning off True Tone, because it changes the colors depending on your environment. You will likely see the image as warmer than it actually is, and you will compensate for this during editing, resulting in the image having too cold, bluish colors. So definitely turn this off when working with a photo. The next step is the Details tab. Once we have sharpening on our image, it's worth dragging the mask to the right. Drag the slider while continuously holding the Option key, and then you will see the mask. We will only sharpen where it is light, and for us, let's say a value of 80 is perfect. There is no noise in our image, so we don't really need to worry about denoising, so we'll leave it as it is. Next is optics. Always enable chromatic aberration, and always enable profile correction. In the case of Olympus cameras, the camera itself already performs the profile correction, so in such cases we can turn this off. The bottommost tab is Calibration, and its bottommost slider is the first place where we adjust saturation, and I drag it quite high here to bring the colors back into our images. So let's say it looks pretty good at a value of 60. I zoom in here, so you can see the before and after. So this is the first place where we tweak the colors. If you remember, I reset the colors here. And later we will come back to play with the colors. The blue might be a bit too strong, and a major drawback of this slider is that it oversaturates the blues. So it's worth coming here to the color mixer to tone down the blues. Something like this. And the image will look natural again. So I do this almost the same way on every picture. Let's go through it very quickly once more. So, the reset. So, Adobe Landscape, Auto. I reset the blacks slightly more, reset the colors carefully and meticulously, and adjust the white balance with utmost precision and care, ensuring everything is perfect. In the Detail tab, I drag the mask to the right. I enable chromatic aberration and profile correction if possible. And in the Calibration tab, I drag the bottom slider. Then, in the Saturation tab for the blues, I compensate for the oversaturation of the blue. Something like this. And here is a before and here is an after. The difference between the two is like night and day. Many people would already be satisfied with this and would post it on Instagram, but we won't do that. We will go several steps further. So, in the first round, this is how far we've gotten. We've balanced the details in the image, so nothing is too dark or too bright, but the picture is a bit lifeless and lacks contrast, which is not a problem, because we will continue editing this in Photoshop. Let's just click on Open. I will name this Edited. Raw. And just so we can come back to it later, I will also bring in our original image here. So now we have an original raw, and an edited raw image. Okay, next, we will make a copy and distort this image a bit, so I'll hide the bottom two layers up so they don't get in the way. I'll zoom out and give our image a bit of room to move, both upwards and downwards a little. I increase the canvas size and press Enter. I zoom back in and use this tool to select the lower part. So, I couldn't photograph this location from a lower angle because then these bushes would have obscured the main subjects of our image. So I definitely photographed it from a higher angle, but I would have preferred to be lower, and we can correct this a bit afterwards. At least make it look as if the camera was at a lower angle. So I select this lower part roughly at the bottom of the bush. I press Command T, and while holding down Shift, I distort the image a bit to make this part narrower, and then press Enter. And if you look at it, it now seems as if I photographed this place from a lower angle. With Command D or deselect, I can remove the selection. I do the same at the top as well. So I select this upper part, somewhere around the mountains, and I press Command T, and while holding down Shift, I stretch it upwards a bit. Something like this. I press Enter and Command D, the selection disappears. If you just click next to it, the selection is active, and if you click somewhere next to it, the selection disappears as well. Let's name this layer Distortion. And now we can cut off the unnecessary parts. First, I turn off these two layers to see our image. I usually crop my images to 16 by 10. And it's very important that I have chosen the golden ratio here and not the rule of thirds. So with the golden ratio, this intersection point comes a bit inward, and we get more sky, which I like in my images. So I adjust it so that the horizon is approximately here. We might cut a tiny bit from the left side, that's unnecessary. And that's about it. So I adjust the horizon once more, roughly to the intersection point. I press Enter, and with the distortion layer still selected, I press Ctrl T. And then right-click and warp. And with this, we can further stretch our image. And we should stretch the corners in such a way that we start to fill this empty space here at the bottom, up here as well, and on the side too. Try to do it in a way that our horizon doesn't curve too much, because then our image won't look good. I think we're pretty much good like this. Okay. Maybe the bottom part is just still a little bit too large, and we'll adjust the top part a little, but we'll solve this in a moment. So I'll press Enter. And I grab this and pull it down just a little bit. And again, I select this upper part. Ctrl T, and while holding Shift, I move up just a little bit again and press Enter. And let's check during the cropping if our horizon is in the right place, but it's not. So I adjust our horizon back to its place, just a little bit, like this. Enter. There are still missing parts here that we can fix relatively easily. So I select the polygonal lasso tool here, zoom in, and select this lower part. It's important that I select a bit inward, so I definitely go a little beyond the empty part. The same on the right side here, so if you hold Shift, you can add to it. You select this as well, and nothing is missing in the upper parts. So if you look, both bottom corners are selected. I come here to select this tool. Right-click, Generative Fill, Generate. And at this point, it tries to figure out what should be there. And it usually does a pretty good job. You can choose from several options. I will choose this one. All right. As the next step, perhaps we should do some error correction. For this, I usually create an empty layer and work on it. But now I want to show you a correction tool that is perfect for fixing the sky. However, for this, we don't need an empty layer but a copy of the entire photo. So I will select both of our layers. I make a copy, make you right-click and merge layers, and then we have a copy of the whole thing. There is a keyboard shortcut for this. Shift-Option-Command-E, and it creates a copy of every visible layer below. Let's name this cleanup. And I would like to remove some of this sky because I don't like it there. It looks as if that part is dirty. So instead of choosing a simple healing tool, which probably does a good job but sometimes leaves the area spotty, as there are spots left now, it's much simpler to select the patch tool. You circle the area where the part to be fixed is. It's important that source is selected here and not destination. I drag this over here, let's say to this spot, and as you can see, it's perfectly fixed. There's a small cloud here too. Let's check this out as well. So I circle this, and if you look, I drag it into the orange area, and it doesn't matter. The colors will be perfect because this tool perfectly corrects the colors and gradients and only transfers the structure. So it doesn't matter what color area you bring it to. However, if I bring it to an area where the texture is different, it will transfer it there, which is obviously not a problem for us. Anywhere in the sky. Doesn't matter what color I bring it to, it will look perfect there. Next, let's start making area-specific changes, enhancing this foreground or tidying up the peak of the volcano or the sky. Let's perhaps start with the sky. So that's the simplest. We will use channel masks for this, and there is a separate tutorial video about it, which we discussed in detail in a separate episode in the preparatory course where we covered advanced tools. So if you haven't seen that, make sure to watch it. The main point is that we will create masks based on brightness, and we will use them to modify certain parts of the image. If you look at the masks individually, you can see what kind of mask the separate red, green, or blue channel would create. You never see the RGB mask because, of course, it's colored. So if I make a selection with Command and left mouse button, I create a mask from it here and name it RGB. And now if I deselect with Command D, you can see what the RGB channel looks like. So this is red, now green, blue, and all three at once. For the first one, we will need the RGB. So Command, I create a curves layer here and just click here to remove this redness. And I don't modify anything on the mask. I select the curve layer, pull it down a bit in the middle. And if you look, our beautiful colors return to the sky with this. I zoom out a bit so you can see better. So before, after. Beautiful, beautiful colors come back here. And this is why we don't mess with the colors at the beginning. Because as you change the brightness of the pixels, the saturation also changes in the image. So as we decrease the brightness in the sky, the saturation comes back. And this is roughly good for us here. The only problem with it is that the whole image becomes a bit lifeless. So if you look, we lose the contrasts, which we really, really don't want. So I put this into a folder. I come up here, select the layer where our image is visible as a whole. Select sky, because I want this adjustment to only apply to the sky. So I come here to this folder and click on the mask. It creates a mask from the selection, and from this point on, we don't touch the foreground. We've only adjusted the sky with this modification. I'll write sky. The next thing we could fix is, let's say, the top of the volcano, so that these snowy and icy parts are a bit brighter, and we better imitate the sunlight. So you can see that we have very nice warm colors here, and I would like to enhance this. So let's see how we can do this. We go into the Channel tab and check where this top part is, the best, where it has the best contrast. And it will probably be the RGB that works for us again. So Command, RGB, curves. Right-click, back. So now we need to adjust the mask a bit to see the mask. For that, you need to press Option and click on the mask. At this point, you can see what the mask looks like. And if you go to Image, Adjustments, Curves, this curve affects nothing else but the mask. So whatever I do here, it doesn't alter the image, only the mask. So now I want this to be more contrasty, so that we don't alter the mountain, only the snowy parts on it. So roughly like this. If I pull this inward from the right, then the lighter parts then become even lighter. If I pull this inward from the left, then the dark parts become darker, and the goal is to have an approximate selection of the snowy, bright areas on the top of the volcano. We are not dealing with the sky right now, it is not significant. So I press OK. And if you look, we really haven't touched our image, nothing has changed, we only adjusted the mask. So with this selected, click here, and now if I pull this inward, you can see that the bright areas become brighter. And now try to completely ignore the sky. So the sky is not important to us, we are only focusing on this part at the top of the volcano, and I am brightening it a little. And by selecting different layers instead of RGB, I can influence the colors. For example, I want this to be warmer. Then I go to the blue and reduce the blue. In this case, it becomes more yellow. So I pull it down, and this part becomes a little warmer. Still, don't bother with the sky. I go to the green, because this part is a bit too green. So if I go up, it becomes even greener. If I go down, however, we add a little purple, which gives it even more of a sunrise feel, something like this. But now we need to ensure that these settings only appear at the top of the mountain and nowhere else in the sky or foreground. So the task is the same again. we put it in a folder and select the part where we want to have an effect. So here is the quick selection tool. You select the layer that actually has the mountain on it. You select the mountain. I come over to the group and press the mask button. And if you look, now we are only affecting the upper part. And although the bottom of the mask is a bit odd here, we can fix this with a simple black brush. So, B for brush, black color, 100% opacity, and we mask out this lower layer here to ensure we don't accidentally affect anything there. That's right. So before and after, you can see that we've beautifully highlighted the snowy part on top of the mountain. Let's name this too. Volcano top. As the next step, we could enhance the foreground as well. So the task is the same. Channels. I select the one that suits me. Color. And I think, once again, RGB will be good for us, because I want to highlight the bright parts of this foreground and also here the bush. So I want to enhance both. So, Command, click, curves, and Option, click on the mask. This way we see the mask. Image, adjustments, curves. And by the way, you can also access this with Command M. So if you look at image adjustments, Command M. And again, I'm just increasing the contrast. The goal is to have only the bright parts selected here, and also include the bright parts of the bush. So something like this. Roughly like this, we're good. I press OK. And again, focus only on the part we are going to modify, so ignore all other parts of the image. So I click here twice. And by starting to drag this inward, this part becomes increasingly brighter, at least only the bright parts. To maintain the contrast even better, perhaps I'll lower it a bit on the dark parts here, and raise it a bit in the middle parts. I'm drawing the usual S shape, and if you look, here's a before, and here's an after. So we've really enhanced this part nicely. It's a bit strong, but it doesn't matter since we're doing the same thing as before. We put it in a folder. I name it Foreground. And now I give it a black mask. So Option click on the mask. At this point it gets a black mask, so nothing is visible unless I grab a brush, use white color and paint somewhere. However, to work more precisely, I will now lower the opacity. Let's say around a value of 30, and I will choose a larger brush, and on the areas I want to enhance, I'll click a few times, paint a few times. Here as well the bush. Something like this. Carefully we'll go over this area too. And it's done. So here is a before and here is an after. Very good. Okay, we're done with this too. The next one might be the last one. Let's enhance the mountain range a bit here. So, for that, again, channels. Let's see. Which channel is good for us? Red, green, blue, green, red. Or RGB. Perhaps the red, Command, click, curves, and Option Command on the mask. Image, adjustment, curves. So again, I'm increasing the contrast. I'm not focusing on anything else, just the mountain range that I want to edit. This should be good enough. I press OK. and exit. I click here twice and brighten it again. I brighten it here as well. And I increase the contrast a bit by drawing an S shape here. So here is a before and after. Task is the same again. I put it in a folder and name it Mountains. I add a black mask to it. Option, click on the mask. But now we need to select the part we will work on again. And the simplest way is using the quick selection tool. Again, I select a layer where the mountain range is visible and select this part. Roughly like this. We went over here, so if you keep holding the option, you can remove the selection from that part, and we're roughly good. Maybe we can add a little more here. Somehow, like this. So we take it off like this. And now, with the black mask selected. Brush, white color, 30% opacity. And I paint into this part. And we enhance this part a bit, like this. And now we can deselect. Command D. So you can see that we brought that mountain range to life. Okay, we're done. This is roughly what I plan to do here in Photoshop, so we'll do the final touches in Camera Raw. So we need to make a copy of the whole thing. As we learned earlier, the Shift Option Command E makes a copy of everything. Another thing you can do is select all the layers that are visible. Make a copy, right-click, and merge layers. Exactly the same thing happens. I will name this Camera Raw Filter. Filter. Camera Raw Filter. Okay, now don't worry about the parts sticking out on this outer section. In fact, to not let it bother us at all, I'm going to click on Cancel. Crop. And here, I will check the option to delete crop, pixels, and press Enter. And now if we open Filter of White, Camera Raw Filter, we see the image just as before. Since we didn't cut off the outer parts, that's why the image looked so strange. So, now our task is nothing other than directing attention. We will primarily make changes affecting the area further and direct the attention of people, the viewers who will look at your image in the future. The process is logical in my opinion. We highlight what we want to show. So I come here to the masks, radial gradient. And one of the main subjects of our image is clearly the volcano. So everything else outside the volcano should be darker. So I invert the selection and darken the outer parts a little by 0.4. And we can compensate for this by slightly brightening the whole image because it might have become a bit too dark. And if you look, we've already directed attention to what's important to us, but this first part is also important to us. So, another radial gradient. And I definitely want to highlight this part and this stone as well. So add radial gradient, and I'll draw another one here. Like this. It's important that my feather is around 95%. So it shouldn't be too low, because then the editing will look ugly. And we can go in two directions. We can increase the exposure, but then everything will become brighter. Or we can just increase the whites, which will maintain the contrast while still brightening that part. And I think this is a better direction. Let's say around 40. And we can even or slightly increase the exposure as well. And if you look, that part might be a bit overexposed. So I'll slightly pull back the highlights. Let's say this. Maybe I'd enhance this part a bit too. So add radial gradient. And perhaps this mountain range could also be interesting. Add radial gradient. Although in this part, it might be a bit much, so I'll delete the last one. Okay, let's create a new mask. Radial gradient. We'll select this mountain range. Slightly increase the exposure as well. We'll immediately increase the contrast as well, or we can try adjusting the whites again. I'll raise the whites a bit, but definitely with the contrast as well. Good. So let's look at the before and after. You can see that the difference is like night and day. We've started to draw attention here very nicely. Let's move on. So, new mask, linear gradient, and this lower part can be a bit darker. So here I'll lower the exposure a bit, let's say 0.4 again, linear gradient. Then I'll come down a bit from the top as well. I definitely don't want to darken the volcano. Subtract, select object. Then we select the volcano, thereby leaving that part alone. And I'll lower the exposure a bit here as well. 0.25, let's say. Roughly like this. I'll return to the full image and we need to increase the contrast a bit across the whole image. So I come here to curves. Of course, we could also just increase the contrast. But we have less control over it that way. So instead, I come here to curves. I pull this in until the sky starts to burn out, which we can't really adjust much, so I leave it at the edge. I raise this part just a little bit. This will make this part a bit faded. But I only raise it a tiny bit so that the areas under the bushes aren't completely black. However, we definitely want to increase the contrast. So, as we learned, the darker pixels are on the left side and the lighter ones are on the right side. So if I darken the darker ones and lighten the lighter ones, the contrast increases. So we should set this up, well, here, to make it look good. Something like this. And here you can see a before and after showing that life has returned to the image. The sky is a bit too bright. So we'll do something about that shortly. So we go back here to the mask. New. Select sky. And we slightly lower the exposure. We bring down the highlights just a little bit. Good. And let's see. So here is a before and here is an after. What the whole image might still handle is a bit of clarity. So I increase the clarity. Let's say around 15, I think we're good. So before, after, you can see that the focus has very nicely shifted to the center here. This part has become a little too bright. So you can see in these red areas that those parts are blown out. We can compensate for this. So I will definitely select that area separately and pull back a little on the whites and a little on the highlights. And then it will look more natural. It was slightly overdone in the second round. Okay, that's it. We look good. I pressed OK. We copy this layer and this will be the sharpening. And we come up here, filter, other, high pass. Here, choose one. Okay. And then here, overlay. This way, the grayness disappeared, but the sharpening remained on this layer. If we look, here is a before and after. The image became much sharper. If you want to sharpen further, you just start duplicating this until it becomes as sharp as you like. For us, this is clearly too much. I would say that maybe here a value of around 50, usually even 1 is often too much. Now maybe it needs more because we have a lot of megapixels. This is a panoramic image, so we have a lot of pixels, and that's probably why we needed 2 or 1.5 layers of sharpening here. And that was all we had to do. Let's quickly go over what we did. So this was our starting point, and we edited it to become this image. So this is already the edited version of the stitched panorama. We distorted it so that the perspective would stand out much better, which we wanted to showcase, and we filled in the missing parts in the lower corner. Then we did a bit of correction. We removed the clouds here and then we darkened the sky a little. Then we highlighted the top of the volcano, then the foreground, and then the mountains here. And in the end, we edited this in Camera Raw filter in such a way that we directed attention to what is important to us. We sharpened it, and that's how this image became this image. So, from this to this. And then as the last step, we come out here. That is File, Export, and export as. I usually save it as JPG. The quality is set to 6, and well, this is a huge image. As you can see, it's a very, very high number of megapixels. So if you want, you can reduce it a bit so that the image size isn't so huge. But if you want to save it in the best possible quality, then obviously don't modify this, and instead pull this up to 7. And what is very, very important is to convert to sRGB, embed color profile. These should be checked. I usually keep the copyright info as well, and then I click on export and save it here, and that's it. It might seem a bit complicated at first, but if you download the raw files and follow each step after me and practice these techniques on other images in my courses, then I'm sure you'll understand and be able to apply them to your own photos soon. Thanks for watching the video. I hope to see you in the next ones. In the meantime, have a great day.